We have topic.
Greetings, it's the 3rd of October, and this is Content Evolution New World. Thanks for being with us. Our topic and approach is going to be a little bit different than the way that we normally hold these calls. Thanks for those of you who are interested in our design charrette for thinking about emergency preparedness. And as I said in my note, as a kid, I remember drilling for tornadoes and, nuclear war by, getting out in the hallway or the duck and cover underneath your school desk. And, there was a certain degree of preparedness. Thankfully, I never had to act on the nuclear war part, but there were times when I had to, get into formation at school because there were tornadoes in the area. So that is certainly, something that I have familiarity with. And I can tell you that, based on, what's happening in the western part of North Carolina, the folks there were not prepared for what happened. I think that there's likelihood that we're going to see more of this. For instance, when I haven't heard from my niece, my sister's daughter and her family since I got a text Friday saying water's running out, the mobile service is dying around here, we don't have any power, and they are completely dependent on their technology. So they never carry cash, and overnight the entire economy went to cash only, right? And so, I know the family, and I know that I've given the kids books as presents, and that was probably the only thing in the house that was still usable in terms of entertainment, because everything else, just, went away in the blink of an eye, right? So I'm sure that there's been some technology withdrawal that took place in that household. I'm looking forward to hearing about it. But I know that they also, the one way that you could have gotten information in the community was through radio. They don't own a radio, right? I know that they do not own an AM or FM radio, right? Because everything was coming through cell phones, iPads, other internet connected things. So with that said, I wanted to have a, conversation and then a, design for what would you want to have families understand and do as these situations, occur, because they will occur. All right. And we will be disconnected, and we will, need to maybe have some of the skills that I had when I was growing up in Boy Scouts. The kinds of, how do you purify water? How do you, eat things when it's not from the grocery store, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, Mike, that's the topic. That's the design charrette. And by the way, charrette is from the French of the cart that goes around in an art office. It has the supplies on it that you would be able to use. So that's where that comes from, is charrette is, basically a derivative of the word cart. Mike.
Yeah, no, when we were discussing this, it was, I harken back to my youth. Honestly, I don't remember the duck and covers. I'm sure they happen. But I honestly don't remember.
You didn't live in Tornado Alley,
No, I meant for the nuclear
okay,
preparedness.
all right, cool.
That I don't remember. We did learn how to prepare for earthquakes, and because the family house was 10 feet above the mean high tide line, I do distinctly remember the Alaskan earthquake, because it was part of the training as boat owners in the Santa Cruz Harbor, that, if you were around and you heard about an earthquake, and it was the result that was most concerning, right, was the tsunamis. And there was the tsunami did come down the coast, and I remember having to go down with my dad. I had to stay in the car, but he and his buddies all went around, had to loosen the mooring lines on the boats, so that when the tsunami came in, the lines didn't snap. They would, as the docks floated up, they would be able to maintain that. And that's a tiny little thing, worried about some guy's sailboat. Well, actually, we're there trying to also protect a lot of fishing boats, commercial fishing boats. That, is interesting. And we did not at that time in California we experienced wildfires. But because there were fewer people in the state, not so many folks lived up in the hills or in a really hard to get to area. But nowadays, and I've checked with my sisters who were formerly teachers and still have friends teachers teaching. If you remember 3 or 4 years ago, the big fires in this part of the world were running down towards the ocean from the hills. And talking to my sister, she said, I'm really glad I wasn't teaching at Santa Cruz High School at that time, because I'm not sure what I would have done. What the school district would have done if they had to. And they were all very close to evacuating schools, but then where would they go? Given the fires. And I think, haven't seen it and tried to look it up, Kevin, but I haven't seen anything specific on that. But it seems to me that in this part of the world, those sorts of kind of maybe not drills, but certainly awareness for citizens is going to have to go ratchet up quite significantly, because we're seeing a lot of people still not know what to do.
100%. And there were things going out in the mountains. By the way, it's not just North Carolina. It's Tennessee, it's South Carolina, it's Georgia. It cut through several different places. There's a lot of devastation to go around. What was interesting that I caught on the news yesterday that is getting more attention today is that there's evidently a quartz mine that's up in the mountains that supplies 80 to 90% of the specialized quartz that's necessary to make microchips. And it's offline, right? And the workers are, don't have places to live. And we're not very far away from, that was a very tightly linked supply chain item. So, good, after they use up the reserves, it's kind of like, oh, this is going to be a problem, right? So whatever. Let's jump in. If anybody else wants to share a story before we go into the actual charrette, we'd be glad to hear from you now.
Yeah,
okay, everybody's got a story. This is great. Suzanne, you're first, then Ben, then I think Kyle raised his hand. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Well, I grew up as a youngster, an Army brat, and we were stationed in Hawaii, in Waikiki. And we definitely did, the nuclear, the under the table exercises there. But we also, in addition, had tsunamis and volcano eruption drills. And, we had a plan in place to head to Diamond Head in any of those events occurred. And, but it was scary as a child, I remember, but it's when you can organize a community that prepares for things like this. And unfortunately, the lack of support, what just happened, at a community level, it just really needs to happen at a community level, and to prepare for these climate events. Yeah, I remember firsthand as a child. Really worried.
Probably in a military environment, there's more instinct to get organized faster, right? And I think that, in some places that instinct, right, is not as prevalent. There are lots of places that I know people and say that they just don't even know their neighbors, right? Because there's no reason to. They know the people at work, they come out the driveway and they head toward, the communities of interest that they're part of. But physically, it takes a disaster like this, right, to, have the people who are physically near each other to actually meet each other. It's very interesting. All right. And, are there ways that we could help, facilitate that? I see your hand up too, Mark. Ben, you want to join first since you piped up?
Yeah, a couple of shotgun of a variety of things. First of all, I do remember duck and cover. The the storm actually core element came through Atlanta and then arched over to Nashville. But the dangerous part of the storm went straight up the west coast of Georgia, and Augusta got hit bad, and Athens west of us. So we dodged a bullet on our side, but that bullet went up the west coast of Georgia into North Carolina. I have some of my SOBs, some students in Asheville, and I contacted them, and they are they have huge problems. One of the biggest complaints was fuel. The lines and accessibility of fuel was a critical crisis for many, and that anticipation of going in for that is certainly, if there's a storm, fill up. And just as some people say, if there's a storm coming, to fill up your tubs so that you can have water to flush toilets and things like that, would paid off to a number of these folks. He had a truck that was filled with fuel ready, and he was going to head up to the mountains where he has a cabin and use Starlink so that he would have internet access, because he was without access in the just outside Asheville, in the area. So it certainly hit them hard, hit them in ways they never expected, in terms of water flows, even those that had some elevation.
Yeah, understood. And thanks for sharing that, Ben.
I mentioned two other quick things. A few years ago, CDC was concerned that young people don't prepare for disasters, and they don't have a duck and cover story in that.
Exactly.
So they put out a campaign of "Are you ready for a zombie apocalypse?"
Yeah.
And asked people to see how they were prepared or would be prepared for a zombie apocalypse. And it garnered a lot of thought and exchange by young people as to what they need to have to be ready. It was very, very well done. I also mentioned that I used to have my students decide how they would prepare their technology for disasters. And one of the tools is the one I posted called Zelda, which is a radio over the internet, walkie-talkie system that coordinates in response to crisis, and is a very useful tool for coordinating people like pet rescue. And it's not just one channel. You set up separate channels for different purposes, and people join in and interact, what they can do, what they need, as well, exchange. But that, of course, did require some nominal internet accessibility.
Right.
Okay. Very good. Kyle, is it okay if I ask? I think you had your hand up first, but Mark is so I'm going to go to Mark, then to Kyle.
Okay, I'm not that anxious, but I am married to somebody who's been through several disasters in Japan, earthquake disasters. And the thing that I've learned is that the antidote to this is not knowing, it's doing. And so you've got to do these things and her motto now is anything could happen. So the idea that people never expected this has to go away. What we have in our house is we have a case of 50-year shelf life water, believe it or not. This exists. It shocked me that it exists,
Yeah.
but there are stores where you can buy this. We never let our car gas level get below half. If that, we just don't do it, because a lot of people get stuck whenever there's a disaster, not being able to get gas. We have ladders to get out of the house in any emergency. So it's really not so much the knowledge, and especially the knowledge is wrong. Like going under your desks, which I did too, it wouldn't have helped us.
That's right. Well, I mean, that's absolutely right. I mean,
when there are things that could help you, it's really important to do them. And when I think about mobilizing kids, and I've talked to Gary Krebs and other people about this, that we need to have them actually do stuff. I mean, the important thing for kids is not that they know stuff, but they go around house to house, making sure that everybody has the necessary stuff, or they do
Mhm.
something else. We can do this in the charrette. But when it happens to you, you very much get real about it. And before it happens to you, you very much maybe think about it,
That's
zombie apocalypse.
I think that's exactly right. That's what is the core hypothesis here, is that putting yourself into this, even though it hasn't happened yet, so that some instincts kick in when it does. It's just like scenario planning, right? That, not all those scenarios are going to happen, but when something that is close enough occurs, it's not unfamiliar. You have some, don't just, huddle, by yourself, mobilize the community, do some things, together, in a, even as small as a community as, whatever is within walking distance, or an apartment complex or townhouses, right? There are enough resources between the folks, if there's enough preparedness, to be able to help each other until the FEMA stuff, arrives, blah, blah, blah.
Hang on one second. I've got to mute something.
Go ahead. Kyle, over to you.
Not a ton of stories other than I lived about 20 minutes from 3 Mile Island back when that happened, and distinctly
let's
remember
restart that.
Yeah, well, they are
I know.
for Microsoft's benefit.
Bill's in charge of it, Kyle. It's going to be fine.
Yeah, it's going to be fine. But I mean, a couple of things strike me is the importance of Starlink, actually, and I've heard of people buying Starlink routers as backups to whatever internet access they have. That all of a sudden seems clear. The other thing that struck me, I saw somewhere that, Asheville was talked about as, ideal for a lot of reasons, climate, weather, that sort of thing. And one of the things that was stated was it's far enough away from the coasts that it's not at risk from climate change. Well, guess what? Yes, it is.
Yeah, there is nothing out of the reach of, the changes that are taking place, because Tornado Alley, when I was growing up, was north central Oklahoma, southern Kansas, right? Guess what? That isn't Tornado Alley anymore. Tornado Alley is now Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, right? And it's moved east, right? And the Gulf of Mexico is now not a place for storms to calm down. It's a place for them to, get turbocharged, right? I mean, it's a lot warmer, and it's kind of like, come on in. It's the hot tub of, of storms, and it's just changing all kinds of patterns, right? And so, yeah, go ahead.
The other thing that struck me was there was a video on TikTok. It was a woman like on her back porch filming up a hill. It was like just like a hill you would sled down, and just all of a sudden when I think of flash floods, I think of flash floods like, oh, you can see it coming around the bend, and then it slowly gets aggressive.
Those Disney movies we saw in school. Remember those, Kyle, where they did
people, up in the
lapse.
desert. Up in the desert where you see the sticks sort of moving, and then you see the water come, and then it gets aggressive. And this was like a Hollywood special effect where this muddy water just exploded over this hill and blew into the valley below her.
That was actually a mudslide that you were watching.
Was it?
Yeah. I mean, because that was not just muddy water, that was a mudslide.
Yeah. I mean, that
debris flow, I think they call it.
The sort of dramatic like speed and scale of this thing was like, I can't even imagine being in it. Like, no way.
I mean, when it starts to pick up the debris and the earth and so on and so forth, the mass of what's, it's going to hit ahead of it, right? The force is so much greater than water by itself, in any event. So here's the here's the thing. I'm going to kind of put a sub category here for Mark, because honestly, I'm not convinced that today I should be designing for, the young people. I mean, I like the zombie apocalypse thing, all right, and what they should, I think that that might be a separate item that we could, charter with young people, all right, is actually get them involved, right? Because I'm not sure that I have the brain and heart, all right, to actually understand which instincts, all right, to imprint on. However, I think we can design for, what can FEMA, what can the American Red Cross, what can, you know, one of the points of presence that we've talked about before, what can the local library, all right, be as a point of presence, all right? That would be a known place to get stuff, or say, well, if I needed an AM radio, where would I get one? It's available at the library. There's a closet someplace that has that stuff,
Yep.
and we're going to hand it out, okay, when the problem occurs, whatever. So let's do
Can
a
I
little
say one thing
designing,
before you start?
and
I'm in agreement with that. I'm in agreement. We can separate out what we do with young people and what we do with adults. But I heard in this thing that I talked about in our last session, I heard a very interesting perspective, which is psychological perspective not just adults, kids as well. That when you are afraid of something, right? That's happening when you see this thing and you get afraid of it, and it actually inhibits you from acting in the present, because your body nervously, your nervous system reacts as if the fear is real. And so you tend to move often, not you, anybody, but people often tend to get into the inaction stage. They get into the I don't know what to do. I don't know, all this kind of stuff. So because they're afraid that this is action, they experience the possible as now. So
Right.
we have to get around that. That's something we have to think
Well,
about.
that's a good point, Mark. There's a phrase of that in the Marine Corps that they usually direct at people in the U.S. Army or other branches, which is that those branches, when in doubt, run in circles and scream and shout. Right. And part of the training we talk about is, to your point about knowledge, just having the knowledge, right, is part of that. A big chunk of military training, is, you guys probably we all read or have experienced. A lot of it is breaking down the individual, the knowledge, where the sense of self, where that's all that matters is me, right? And part of that is, how do you start listening to take orders and work as a unit? And I think your point is, that about just knowing and having read a book or watched a movie is not enough. You do have to practice it. You need to drill it, so as Kevin mentioned earlier, it becomes kind of a natural response to overcome, as you're describing, that initial shock and fear. It's like, okay, I've learned what to do. I know, in this sense, I secure my house. I turn the gas off if I have a wrench. And, that's the big thing in California with earthquakes, right? They tell you to go find the gas line and turn it off.
yeah, and one of the things that they're saying is, to the people out in Western North Carolina, is if you have an electric, water heater, and the electricity comes back on before the water goes on, go make sure
Yep.
your water heater's turned on, because you're going to burn it out, and it's a fire hazard, right? And most people don't understand that connection, right? So it's really good stuff. And what I'm going to put on the table from my point of view is John Boyd's Department of Defense OODA loop. Okay. Observe, orient, decide, act. Short cycles. All right. This is the way that the Navy SEALs and the Army Rangers and the Green Beret, and they use OODA loop as the way for their small teams to get a mission, but they're not told how to accomplish it. Okay. In the Army, you're going to get, instructions on, here's how to do it. All right. Here's what we want. All right. These little teams are just said, this is the outcome we want, go do it. Right. And I think that in disaster preparedness, what we need to be able to give, at least the adults, is OODA loop training. Is to not freeze up is similarly like the end of the Martian, the movie. He's training the kid. He said, look, here's what you've got to do. All right. When you're in these situations, space is there to kill you. Right. So what do you have to do? You have to keep on, solving one problem at a time. You know what it is. You go after it. You hit it hard. You use science and math. All right. And then you go on to the next thing you got to, solve enough problems and you live. Right. Well,
Yeah.
that's pretty damn good advice. If you link together that, and OODA is trainable, right? I mean,
Sure.
that is would you use it every day? Probably not. But in crisis, to have that kick in and just say, observe, orient, decide, act in like 60 to 5-minute cycles, that'll keep you alive, at least in my opinion. All right. So,
Yeah. I was, Ben, you put a really good comment in the chat about walkie-talkies, and this ties in, Mark, with the young generations. Walkie-talkies is an amazing solution. I think leveraging a program, it takes more than one, right? You have to communicate to someone else, but centering around, OODA principles and using walkie-talkies as a community-based. I mean, like your members of your family, Kevin, if the technology that was taken away, having that AM FM radio and walkie-talkie.
I've got walkie-talkies here at the house, but the reason I have walkie-talkies, it's a secondary benefit for emergencies, is it's tied into the security system, right? Is that, when a vehicle trips, and it has enough metal mass to go past one of the sensors, the walkie-talkies, tell me, right, that, zone 1 has been triggered, or zone 2 or zone 3. And so that's a good thing. Mike, you told me when we were organizing this call that you've got a walkie-talkie in your ski kit.
I have two. They've been selling those for 30 plus years to backpackers and backcountry skiers because, and what I was going to add to that, Kevin, is that ideas, those are all available at things like REI, or I've never been in one, but I'm assuming a Dick's Sporting Goods has one, has the same thing. Hunters use them all the time. And I think those are great. It's like, first of all, to your point, yeah, a library could be, or any school could have a supply of those. And the only thing I would add is let's make sure you put the frequencies on the back that people know what to turn to, so they're just not idly chattering, right?
Is there any
that's
reason?
a thing.
Go ahead. I was going to say, is there any reason that we wouldn't want to start to encourage the mobile handset makers to start to include P2P functionality? Okay, that hey, you've lost communication with the tower, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tower signal not available. All right. So, default, right, is, either, via, it's probably, Wi-Fi, all right, signal is that you can create a daisy chain, if you're within, the right, density, to be able to reestablish communications with people who are nearby, as opposed to the damn things just going dead, all right, because you can't get to the major network.
I don't know.
There are P2P protocols, I
Sure.
think, but we just don't enable them. And I think that we probably got to figure out how to do that, right? Because that puts a walkie-talkie in your hand.
Don't
Ben's
all these
put that in the chat.
technologies, don't all these technologies, walkie-talkie or anything else, require power? And so ultimately they're batteries, but if you have it for too long, or if it's underwater, the batteries might not work. And there's a lot of issues, and we alluded to this at the beginning, that while you have power, there's still a lot of things you can do, and people do, and they call each other and they find this out. Once the power is lost, that's a real issue.
Yeah. Well, I have, solar chargers. Okay. So I have the ability to charge phones, right, at least once or twice a day, even if it's overcast, there's enough, solar, coming through to be able to, charge that
Oh.
device up, and my office, this is more than that, but it's got a, solar array that's connected to marine batteries. And so I can run that office off grid with an inverter, for a whole day. Right.
Yeah, but
Right,
to Mark's point,
but for everybody, but and
I'm not
the
suggesting everybody would have
the
that.
wealthy people can do a lot of these things, like everything else in the world. And the question is, what do you get for, so are there sort of ways to get free solar chargers that you can have, and store in your house, so that if everything
I-
else fails, you can do that?
I think
those
that that's a good idea, because I think that the cost of those single unit chargers just for a mobile phone are pretty inexpensive.
Yeah.
Right.
oh,
could
and
be
they do
given
sell,
away.
and
could
Mark,
be
they do
given away.
sell. I have a couple. Now I've said that. Now I got to remember where I put them. You can get these things that are basically the size of maybe two iPhones stacked.
Yeah.
And the whole front is just a solar panel.
Yeah.
And in about 2 hours with direct sunlight, it'll fully charge, and you can get 3/4 charge on a standard iPhone or smart device or whatever to pull that, that's enough.
Absolutely.
Now, to your point,
If
that's
you
not going to
have
help
it,
much if there's no cell towers.
or if you
Radios and
don't
walkie.
have it, or if you don't have it, or you don't know where it is in your
Oh, yeah.
band, or stuff like that.
Well, that's to
the
your point.
question is a lot of small things that we could do. Yeah.
The point is that needs to be part of the charrette. Is like, what do you have in your home, and now go make, let's help, if you can't afford it, let's find a way to get that for the city or your county or whatever. But here are number of things you need.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Basic, minimal, viable, whatever you want to call it.
You know,
Minimal
when you
viable
when you
survival
donate
kit.
when you donate to public radio, they give
And
you a
cranks.
bucket. And one of the things that people need is a place to shit. And another thing, so they give you a bucket with a kit of a whole lot of stuff for donating.
And I think they have those crank
things
radios,
are-
Ben's.
Yeah, and those kind of things are important. And for me, the
I
issue
what?
is, how do you get them to everybody?
Oh,
Well,
Oh,
right. Go ahead, Susan. Sorry.
Suzanne, I saw, what you were saying about Faraday. I just wanted to point out, for those of you who for any reason would want a Faraday cage, right? I have one, but the least expensive Faraday cage that you can have is old microwave, cut off the power cord so that it never gets plugged in again. The interior of a microwave oven is a Faraday cage.
Mhm.
It's a really good one too, by the way. So if you don't want to, cut the power cord off of your current microwave, go down to the junkyard. There are plenty of them available. You can just rescue one, and there you go. You've got a safe place from EMP pulse or prying, waves. Okay.
Good for privacy too.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a skiff, but it's
No.
big enough for the devices, right? It's big enough for the devices, hard drives and things like that, mobile phones.
Nice.
So let's go to actual design solutions. Maybe you've been thinking about, one or more of them. I'm going to start with Ben, because you put a practical thing out on the table. This zombie apocalypse, that FEMA thought about, and they said, well, this is a way to kind of break through, it's like the, how do you make the safety seatbelt, thing entertaining so that people will pay attention to it in the airplane, all right, as opposed to ignoring it? That has been effective. Ben, what would be an adult analog to, making safety preparedness something that adults would attend to, without this, kind of, saying, I don't want to think about,
Right. Disasters.
that kind of negative thing. I mean, could you insert this meme into Halloween annually? Right. I want to just, how would you approach that? How would you adapt what they came up with?
yeah. In the case of CDC, this was the group they were starting up called marketing. They call it marketing, but it's really awareness and informational. And they were starting with the premise that the millennials were not paying attention nor concerned about dealing with crisis readiness. And so the zombie apocalypse was was their means of raising the discourse and discussion. As you'd mentioned, most of us that grew up in boomers were in Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, and a core part of our activities were camping that directly or indirectly engaged in intrinsic preparation, intrinsic readiness. And I always valued winter camping. Summer camping can be pretty light, but winter camping you really got to think. And I always found that as a fair readiness. How you get communities engaged is very difficult because, as you say, our lifestyle is not community oriented as it used to be, and that neighborhoods themselves are often sleeping residences and not community activities. So you have to create something artificial, but that is in engaging. And certainly, if I were in a community in Asheville where it's too late to say we won't be impacted, but in a community like that is very used to annual events, I would raise awareness through annual activities that are fairs and things like that that would create some social engagement that has as a byproduct. I want an intrinsic learning, not an extrinsic activity.
Here. And I think, part of the charrette, I think Kevin talks about education, not just with adults, but I think it should be, there were elements and there were elective classes we could take in junior high and high school that were about, not survivalist sets, but basic classes in, outdoor survival, how to plant identification. But also, I think part of the charrette would be, this could be something that not just benefits for disaster preparedness, but, basic and advanced life saving and first aid. That's part of a required part of junior high or high school.
Yeah.
That's a basic those were classes that I was taking as a young kid. And those certifications, as I mentioned to you, Kevin, I actually would put those certifications on job resumes, right? For whatever job I was looking for, or even when I was going out into the professional world as a reporter, I put that on every resume, and editors and hiring people noticed that. They're like, oh, okay.
Hey, boss, if you hire me, I can bring you back. All right. When you're
I know. If you need to stop smoking, dude, but if you do have a heart attack, I got you covered.
To Kevin's point, you might have events like around Halloween is certainly a very attractive notion for a fair that approaches Halloween as a date or some other event. And shop, for example, in high school and junior high, we had shop in those days. They don't have shop anymore. I cannot tell you how much that prepared me for home ownership.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the point is that Halloween and the Day of the Dead kind of things like you have allow you in the moment to talk about death, okay, in a context that is more playful than otherwise, you're kind of like, I don't want to think about this. Well, I mean, this, the amount of money that is flowing through the Halloween
pipeline,
is actually rivaling the late December things. It's not the gift giving component, but it's all the adjacent activities. Has become quite a moneymaker. All right,
isn't there?
Get the candy people involved.
Yeah, right. I'm just pointing out that
to what you're saying,
they're sponsors, okay, to be had here, right?
I'm keeping notes, but it's like that's a brilliant idea, Ben. It's like, if it's Halloween and you're in grade school or junior high school, last two classes of the day are basic emergency awareness preparedness, then you can go out and trick or treat. Get your little certificate, come home, show it to mom and dad. You can go out and trick or treat. You make that part of the fabric, and everybody goes, far out. Let's do that. And you could be teaching them things about, that's not realistic looking blood that you have there, Johnny. Here, let me show you what it really looks like. And this is what happens when somebody's injured.
The underlying problem with that is that what we have learned over all the years is that teaching this stuff, and the UN is learning this lesson in a very big way. They're trying to teach about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and they have the world's largest lesson. And it's not lessons that do stuff. It's the doing. It's when Ben took shop. It's not because he was lectured to or told these are the things.
But we're not disagreeing with you, Mark.
But we're not disagreeing, Mark. But that's what we covered that off. That it's the training, right? It's the knowledge of awareness. This is what happens. You have X and Y. When somebody has a heart attack, here's how you assess for CPR, whether you do need to do CPR or not, because that is a thing. And to your point, you need to practice and train. That needs to be built into the systems, not like, here's a bunch of stuff to read and some pictures. It's like, here's how it happens. Now, here's the theory. Now practice.
And something that's really good for that in our day and age is simulation. Yeah. And that's where Richard comes in and all these other people come in.
I was thinking, that, Mark, that's a good trigger, because I had a note next to me. Another place where we vicariously experience the war and other things are in games, right? Is that you're first person shooter in a war game, or in an alternative universe that has been created, and here you are, the Dungeons and Dragons kind of stuff. Well, you could probably create a pretty interesting climate apocalypse game, all right? And allow people to play it as a fun activity, but at the same time learn skills at the same time, right? That there are things that you can do, all right, in a game environment. I don't know. I wouldn't know how to actually approach levels or activities there, but it's something that would be more engaging if it was a game.
Yeah, I absolutely support that. I always and the trick between simulations and games is very interesting, the relationship, because simulations often need to be true, so that the idea if something takes 5 minutes to do, it takes 5 minutes. But in a game, you don't want it to take 5 minutes. You want it to take 5 seconds. And so, but to put one of these together, to put a thing where the levels of the game were landslide, fires, mudslides, storms, hurricanes, twisters, all those things, where each one of those was a level that you could go through and beat. That's a very good idea.
Hey, Kyle,
and hard to make.
Yeah, Kyle, we could probably just ask, one of the generative AI systems to imagine a game, all right? And, what are the hazards, in the, the environmental apocalypse game, and what are the levels, and blah, and it could probably describe what the, functional attributes are that a designer would have to go and flesh out. Right.
If you do it in Claude, it'll actually write the game.
I was going to say it would actually write it, because
or Replit, either one, Replit or Claude. You could just,
but at a very primitive level, it'll write the game.
Not necessarily, Mark.
I think
you mean it'll write a console game for you.
What's that?
You think we could get it at this stage? I see this as forever. Will happen, but to write literally a console level game.
I don't know about that. I don't know anything about that world, but you could certainly write a sophisticated computer game.
Yeah. So that's probably something that we should spirit over to
Richard. Richard would be great.
Yeah. Well, I will take, I'll certainly get Richard's, attention on this, since he's not part of the call today.
Actually, Ben, you put,
but I also want to have Collab, take up swipe.
notes to modify an existing game. I think actually some of the initial gen Apple II and some of those games their copyright protections. They're now in the public domain.
You can mod them, and a lot of them
And they were
mod.
built to be modded, and that's I think you could I think that's actually really, that's a brilliant one actually. Because most of those, as I recall, Ben, are kind of quest oriented types of games, except for like the first person shooter type stuff. But even those, there was a a
Depends on
stage, a
what you
sequence of
shoot. I
events.
used to shoot ideas out of cell phones. So yeah, there are lots of ways to do this. I think it's a very good idea, and I'd be perfectly happy to be part of thinking about it.
Okay. Well, I know that you are an advisor to Ultisim and QuestSim, Mark. So when I get that teed up with Boyd, when I send the note over, I'll carbon copy you.
Please. And the interesting thing is that I spent a lot of my life in the game world, and the hardest thing in the world to do is to make a game that's both exciting and people want to do it but with a specific set of content in mind. And usually it works by going with the flow. And when Will Wright tried to do this and said it was too hard, I said, whoa, he's probably one of the smartest people I know. So it's tricky, but it doesn't necessarily work for everybody. But America's Army did it. That was the only game that ever broke through as a game that got millions of people playing it. That was a simulation about being in the Army, and it did what it needed to do, which was taught people stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is basically Sim City or Farmville in reverse. Okay.
Exactly.
Then instead of making something, it's kind of like, the farm just got destroyed. Okay.
Yeah, fix it. Absolutely. And that's a perfectly good quest for a game. And a lot of people would want to do that if it were done right. And it's a hard thing to do, but it would be very worthwhile. And if what comes out of this charrette is, yeah, we should sort of figure out how to put together that thing, or how to bring together people who know how to do this and make it happen, and use all the AI that works today to make it easier and all those kind of things, that would be a great outcome.
Okay.
Sim City, as I remind you, had random and turn on disasters that were plane crashes, floods, fires. From a city manager standpoint,
Right.
you had to deal with the crisis, not necessarily from an individual lens perspective or community, small community. But they are almost all these games have Unreal or Unity engines as their basis. So there's no reason you can't augment a Unity engine with it too. I know my students would start with something like Game Salad and build a toy version of that interactivity and then translate it over into Unity.
I don't know
Unreal.
what that is. What is Game Salad?
Game Salad's a free to pay game development environment.
Okay.
So you can build small toy games, but you're not. If you want real things, you've got Unreal Engine or Unity.
Okay.
The issue is this stuff costs money or time, and so and a lot of it to do one of these things at a level that really could potentially make a difference. I mean, I've built those kind of games. We're talking these days millions, and it could be in kind. I mean, if everybody did it collectively and open source, maybe that would be, but it's literally millions of dollars of effort that you're putting into these things. So it's a serious project. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's a serious project, and maybe AI brings down a bunch of that cost in a number of ways. But I think it's a very good, serious project, and something that we should all consider.
Well, I'm going to just say this. I don't think it's a project. What I think it is at the category level, we could simply show that there is interest in this. And therefore, one of the big legitimate game developers might decide, oh, a disaster? All right, this would be great. And the disaster movies are so popular. Well, we'll just do we'll version this, okay? And it becomes something that, oh, well, FEMA wants to make one, and the CDC wants to make one, and the legitimate games and then there's an open source for, I don't actually care that one particular thing comes into existence. I'm more interested in stimulating interest at a category level to raise the level of, population awareness about how to deal with this and how to have been in the situation in advance so that they're more competent humans and able to,
Absolutely.
get through it, survive, and potentially, learn how to cooperate where maybe there wasn't any reason to do that in daily life, but the instinct would kick in, when the disaster happens.
Well,
So
And absolutely, that's where simulations work really well. The Army is very familiar with them, the military, everybody, and they do work, and they do teach stuff. And the question, so I love the idea of building a category. Competitions work very well for this because young people get excited about this and they try to go. X prizes work really well for this because then teams compete for a lot of money and they invest in that kind of stuff. And the government, bless its heart, when it can ever get itself together to actually do something well, can also invest a bunch of this stuff.
yeah, the thing about simulation that I've observed, versus games is games draw you toward them because there's emotional content, right? Entertainment content that goes along with it. Training simulations, have a purpose that they're very good at running the nuclear submarine or flying the airplane, but it's one of those things that unless you have a goal to want to fly the airplane, right, you're not going to participate in the simulation unless there's a reason because I want to do that. All right.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely agreed.
so
And
I'm trying to cut across the general
yeah.
population. We need the attractiveness as opposed to the, purpose, built sim.
Games are very good at that motivation and providing you an incentive to get to the end and beat
100%.
the game. And the simulate, and so that you have to carefully build when you're dealing with the real world, you have to carefully build in what is real and what's not.
Yeah.
The if you build into it, and the classic example is if it takes a tank's cannon 3 minutes, which I think is the number, to cool down before it can take a second shot. And you try to put that into a game as something that happens, it won't be a good game. It'll be a good simulation. The same thing you can see how that could work for disasters. There are certain things that you would have to do, and you don't want people to learn the wrong lesson, which is that you can just do all these things very quickly or in particular ways, and that it will work. So you've got to, it's a tricky thing to build, but I'm very much in favor of it.
Yeah. Doug Houlihan, I see you on mute. If you're in the sound of my voice, we have there you are. Something that came up before you joined, which would like to, since you're so well tied into the mobile telecom industry, is we said, hey, when the tower goes out, is there a way for what we all have in our hands to kick into an emergency P2P protocol, so that I can establish kind of walkie-talkie communications, with people that are nearby? What is the likelihood that manufacturers could embrace that as we increasingly, are going to see, disasters and cell towers go out from time to time? What would cause manufacturers to either enable or want to do that?
Yeah, well, so 5G, they implemented direct to direct communication for FirstNet first responders, and so you don't even have to be on network, and you can have communication to communication. Now, I'm not sure how that would work with the public, if that's implemented, or is it just only for first responders that have that application? I do know that if you go into
take a look at that.
if you go to 911, Even if your network provider is down,
Well,
another
the
network
staircase
provider
and the carpet
is
in the
still an
bedroom.
option. You know, so it's like for 911 calls, if they can find a signal from any provider, you'll get the call through. And then Apple's, you know, iOS 18 now has a feature that you can make emergency calls, I believe. I know for sure it's text messaging, but I think it may be even
Satellite.
emergency calls with
Line of-
satellites.
Okay,
They have
that's good. Thank you.
SOS.
That's a great benefit, and I think that that's why I got some messages from people in Western North Carolina that I otherwise wouldn't have gotten. 'cause
Oh,
the
yeah.
Hours were down.
Yeah.
I saw I'm going to conclude here. I saw that, was it Ben, you put something in chat about Carter's 100th anniversary. Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah, I was just making note that President Carter celebrated his 100th birthday this Tuesday, and I used to have lunch periodically with him, and he was always interested in technology, what's going on in tech, and I had a call one day to come in he wanted to know more about virtual worlds 2008, and they asked me to come and have lunch with him and bring my computer. And so I took him into Second Life and took him to some of the islands where they were doing with training on disaster, because they're also voting areas and things like that, and showed it to him. I put signage up saying, welcome President Carter, first president in virtual worlds, and I stopped paying my rent. So since 2008, I have not paid for my island in Second Life, but it's still there, and you can visit it at any time.
Yeah, I built an alumni relations center for IBM people in Second Life, right? And I delegated it to someone else because I said, I don't, if I can't be me, if I can't build an avatar that looks like me, I don't want to be in there. So you had to be something other than yourself. And I said, I trade in authenticity, and this doesn't feel right to me. So
Well,
anyway,
20% of the people would go in as furries. So looking at behaviors as to how people select avatars. Your aspiration was yourself, but that's not always the case.
I got that. So I'm going to read something to close us off here that relates to our topic and to Carter's birthday, because I think there's some authenticity. This is George Bernard Shaw. This is the true joy in life, being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one. Being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I'm of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live, it's my privilege to do for it what I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die. For the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a short, splendid torch, which I got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. I think that's a pretty good summary of how, Carter has lived his life, right? And
Very much so.
it's something that I think is authentic to what we were discussing here, trying to help people, grasp onto the behaviors that would allow them to survive these moments that are likely to be coming more often. We had some really good ideas today. Thank you. I'm going to document them. I'm going to pass them on to people who can take action on them. And gratitude, I think that we will probably do a design charrette again, right? When we have an appropriate topic. Thanks for all you do, and everything you do, be intentional. We'll talk next week. Thank you.
See ya.